007 First Light is finally here. It is the first piece of visual 007 media that we've had in 5 years. The first James Bond video game in 14 years, since we all thought that this piece of shit was probably going to be the last James Bond game. And for a while, it felt like it. Thank you. It wasn't. This is an origin story for James Bond. It is developed and published by IO Interactive. And right then and there, I was like, perfect. They are the perfect people to make a James Bond game. The creators of Hitman making a 007 game. That's a match made in heaven, and this is the origin story of James Bond, played by Patrick Gibson in this game. Bond is a 26-year-old in the Royal Navy. He's an air crewman, and after an international incident in Iceland, he is recruited by MI6 into the 00 program, where he teams up with his mentor Greenway to investigate an international incident, and that's all I'm going to say. This is going to be the beginning of the First Light coverage on the channel. There's going to be a lot of coverage for this game. This is a spoiler-free review. I will not be talking anything plots unless if it doesn't really spoil anything, like small minor details here and there. In this video, there will be a solo spoiler review. There will be a giant spoiler discussion review with one of my buddies when he's done playing the game. There might even be like a tier ranking for the chapters and all that, like ranking each section of the game. Might be a little bit hard because it wasn't set up the way I thought it was going to be, broken up like that. It's a very linear game, but there's going to be a lot of coverage on this channel for it because I cannot wait to talk more in depth about 007 First Light because it is such a great game. Oh my god, I was so happy this game delivered. It gave me a little bit of an appetizer as we wait for the next Bond to be announced and for the next movie to come out, which is probably still about 3 or 4 years away. But this is like a nice little thing down the middle. We actually have a shiny new James Bond thing to talk about. And you guys know me. I'm a giant 007 fan, a 007 nerd, if you will. And I was so happy to get my hands on this game, even if I did have reservations about it, even if IO Interactive was developing it, because I wasn't sure. I was like, oh, a young James Bond, an origin story? I don't want to see 26-year-old Bond. I don't want to see TikTok Bond, okay? That's what I called him for the longest time. Honestly, I don't want them to go down this route in the movies because I feel like they're just going to kind of copy everything that this game does in the movies moving forward now that Amazon has complete creative control, which kind of sucks. But the game delivered, and I was happy. I have a few minor qualms with the game, but overall, man, I don't get addicted to video games all that much anymore. I'm not a big video game player all that much. You really have to grab my attention with these games, or it has to be part of a property that I like. I think the last video game that I got addicted to was Ghost of Yotei. The Ghost of Tsushima was a very good game. Ghost of Yotei, I beat in maybe like 3 days. It was that addicting. Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, another one. And now 007 First Light coming to you just 2 days after release with this review. It is such a great game. I was really looking forward to a lot of the shootouts, the driving sections in this game. They really put all the heart and effort and the devotion and the care into this. It doesn't just pull references from the movies or the books and just slap the James Bond name onto it. They actually are like, okay, like, we need to craft a good game out of this. They take the bare bones of what they did with Hitman, mix it with the platforming of Uncharted, and you have your Bond game. It's a completely new engine that IO Interactive developed here. I can see some of the comparisons to Hitman. I like that this game gives you multiple avenues. It is a linear narrative, but it gives you multiple avenues in many of the early missions to go about completing your objectives in different ways. For instance, that gameplay showcase that they showed, where they showed off the gameplay, I think it was back in like December or January or something, or September, when they gave you, it was at a state of play. They showed about a half hour of gameplay. This is fair game to talk about since it's already on the internet. A part of the game where Bond is posing as the chauffeur, and he infiltrates the Grand Carpathian Hotel where there's a world chess match going on, and he investigates a blonde man. and you have to find a way to get into the hotel. I was so dead bent when I got to that section of the game to complete it the way that when they did the showcase that the IOI interactive people did. And then I completely did it a different way. And I'm pretty sure once I got into the hotel, I did things a different way there as well. And there's so many avenues in all the missions that you could take that leave this game with a huge replayability factor, which is why in maybe like a month or so, I think I'm going to replay it again and try and find different ways to complete objectives like that. For instance, the way that they did it in that showcase was they went over to the right of the hotel. They had to like turn on the water, burn get a lighter, burn the wheelbarrow full of mulch, and then hop in the hotel through a window. The way that I did it was I had to go get this press badge. So I kind of want to do it the way that they did it, or see if there is another way to approach it. And once you get into the hotel, or for instance, once you get into the opening mission in Iceland, if there's a different way of going about that. There are so many different avenues that I appreciate in this game that you can take. It's a linear narrative, but it's not necessarily a linear path to complete the game. It's a non-linear path. There are parts of the game that are linear, especially later on in the game at the very end. It becomes very linear and you can't explore as much. Things like that are what make this game so replayable and so good. Visuals amazing. You don't know how many screenshots I took on my PS5 of just so many gorgeous locales. They capture the globetrotting adventure of James Bond so well with so many exotic vacation like locales, like just images that will be ingrained into your memory if you ever went to these places on vacation. Visually stunning, and it runs smooth. And there were a couple of glitches here where a guy just kept running into a wall and he was kind of like fizzling out like that. There were only like one or two instances like that, but that can be fixed with a day one patch, which I think that they have already released. There were a couple instances where my game did keep crashing, so I don't know if that is on their part or if that is my PlayStation. It could be on them, or it could just be a faulty disc. I have no idea. I'm not faulting them for that. That is not a negative of the game. What I want to talk about, though, James Bond himself. Okay, is this James Bond? Through and through, yeah, it is. This is how he becomes 007, how he enters the 00 program. At first, I was just like, this is interesting because he doesn't have a lot of the Bond quips or the one-liners that you would expect Bond to have, or that slight like British dry humor that Bond always has. But as the game progresses, you get those. And every time you get those, I was just like, yep, that is Bond through and through. I like that it's not tied to a specific Bond actor or a specific Bond movie. I think some of the best Bond video games are the ones that are standalone adventures, that aren't movie tie-ins, that tell an original story. And in the case of this, an original Bond. This isn't based off any pre-existing Bond actor. It's not based on Connery, Lazenby, Moore, Dalton, Brosnan, or Craig. It's IOI's own take on Bond. And they give him the cheek scar from the books. Mrs. Ponsonby is in here. She's in the books. Patrick Gibson is so good as James Bond in this game. I have heard people say that he should be in the running for the movies, and I would agree, but I do think that IOI wants to keep their video game Bond completely separate from the cinematic Bond, and that is totally fine. I would love to see him as Bond in a movie, but if he is just Bond in the video games, that's also fine to me, because I completely understand that this isn't canon to the Bond movies. This is something completely different. It's an origin story for Bond, and he captures a youthful, still reckless, but coming into his own and becoming the Bond that we know, James Bond, so well. And I love all the supporting characters around him. Greenway became one of my favorite Bond characters ever. I love when Bond takes issue with authority, but yet you can see the mutual respect that he has for authority figures around him. happens with Greenway in this game. One of my favorite Bond characters ever in any visual medium, even in the novels. One of my favorite Bond characters is Greenway. I did like the main Bond girl, Charlotte Roth, who may have a bit of a hidden nature to her. Thought she could have been utilized a little bit more, but in the end, I did like that she kind of had this gray area, and I'll talk about that more in a spoiler review. One Bond girl that I thought could have been in the game a lot more is Teresa Lorca. You meet her in the Vietnam mission, and that's the only part of the game that she's in. I thought that she was actually going to serve as like the Bond girl for the last third of the game. She was going to team up with Bond for the rest of his mission. Totally not the case. So I think that there could have been, writing wise, a little bit more utilization in here. And writing, we'll talk about the writing in a minute because that is one of my problems with the game. But I also do consider this chick, Cressida, as a Bond girl. I'm going to talk about her. I think it's fair game. Bond has a couple of double O friends, Monroe and Cressida. Their dynamic is awesome. Like, you can tell that these three are best friends in the double O program. And when shit hits the fan, you know that they're going to have their backs for each other. Cressida is a great character. She's a great ally to Bond. She's a great friend to Bond. None of these people are ever like, hey, Bond, I'm better than you. No, like, they question Bond, but they have the respect. Like, Bond still has the charm. He still has the flair for the dramatic that we know Bond to have, that he would have around people. And that's what I love about Bond and his dynamics with every supporting character in this. Moneypenny. Love Moneypenny in this. The villain. Okay, let's talk about the villain because IOI did such a great job at hiding the villain in the marketing for this game. Completely took me by surprise. I don't want to say they're my favorite Bond villains ever. And I think that their plan was a little bit predictable, but the dynamic. How do I want to word this other than dynamic? I guess the utilization, like the idea of the villain. Interesting. And I'll talk more about it in the spoiler review. Wasn't really expecting that. I'll say this. In the marketing, they really hype up that 009 is the main villain. I'll just leave it at that. If you're expecting this to be a lot like Hitman, yeah, there's a lot of stealth dynamics in this game. There's a lot of, you can go in guns blazing. I like this whole license to kill thing. Like, you can't just go into a place, like you can't just go into the Grand Carpathian Hotel and start mowing people down, because I think that that's where lost me with Bond games after a while. Like, they just became Call of Duty clones. 007 Legends, you're just Bond as a mass murderer. Like, you're killing people for no reason. Like, this game is like, okay, like, if you are provoked, you have that license to kill. And that is when you can start shooting people. What I like about it is that you do have to be resourceful, though. You have to go hand to hand a lot in the combat. You don't have a lot of ammo lying around, so you can take your gun, throw it at an enemy, pick up their gun, start shooting people, pick up their gun, start shooting people. So ammo is very scarce. That is by design, and I like that a lot because it requires you to be resourceful when it comes to the firefights. Now, tied into that is the combat. The combat, I was actually shocked that they had a very extensive combat system. Way better than QTEs or just going up to somebody and having one animation for a takedown or something like that. A lot better than I was expecting it to be. A lot more sophisticated than I was expecting it to be. Like, it's an actual combat thing. Like, you have yellow glints, red glints, and you have to either evade when there's a red glint or parry when there's a yellow glint. Enemies have specific types of armor that only certain weapons can penetrate, or they have weak spots where they're not wearing armor and you have to shoot them there or use your gadgets there, which the use of the gadgets is awesome. So it's a very extensive combat system, and I'll come back around to the combat in a minute, but let's talk about the use of the gadgets, because there was a very vast lack of gadgets in the Craig era video games, where it was really just your smartphone and all that. But they came up with really creative gadgets in this game, and I like that you have to use your gadgets a lot to either take out some enemies or complete objectives or get into places that you can't normally get into. They make the gadgets worthwhile, and they don't leave you with just one or two. You get about, I would say, 6 or 7 that you can bring with you, and you have a specific loadout. So before, every time there's like MI6, you go back to MI6 at certain points in the game, you go into Q Lab and you have a certain loadout where you can bring certain gadgets with you. You can't bring them all at once. I'm just saying that right now. You do have to always keep the Q watch with you, but you can bring like, I don't know, like smokescreen with you, or the missile pen with you or something like that. So you have options, you have variety to go with the gadgets, with the mission objectives to go about completing and progressing through the story. Let's talk visuals again. Moving through MI6 QLab, that was way more extensive than I thought it was going to be too. Like, I was actually sitting there and I was like, holy shit, like I am actually Bond walking through Whitehall MI6 right now. MI6 does keep the name Universal Exports like it does in the movies. It's their front, it's their cover up. I love that. The fact that you can actually walk around MI6, the fact you can walk around Q Branch completely amazed me. The level of detail they put into this game, because they're like, yeah, that would be cool for people to walk around. Yeah, I mean, sure, you don't really do much when you're walking around Whitehall and you just have to go to M's office, but you can walk from there to Q Branch, which is amazing. And you can do a lot of shit in Q Branch. Like, he has the jetpack from Thunderball, and you can turn that on. And you have all the funny Q quips when you hit a gadget. And, you know, in the movies, he has somebody who's like testing the gadgets and they go flying backwards or something. That's all in here. Every time I was in Q Lab, I had a very big smile on my face. And it wouldn't be a James Bond video game if you didn't have driving or vehicular levels. I do think that this did take slight getting used to, but it in sometimes the driving levels do feel a little bit repetitive because it is just chase this person or escape from this person. But you can at least crash into stuff, or later on in the game when there's vehicles involved, you do have the ability to use gadgets or use firepower. So it's kind of like, okay, we're going to tease you with some chases here, but then you'll be rewarded later when you get to use all the firepower you want later in the game. It does take a little bit to get used to the driving mechanics, but once you get used to them, I think that the driving levels are awesome. The vehicular levels are awesome. You have boats in here you can drive. You have different cars you can drive. Really, really, really extensive work and thought put into a James Bond video game. Now, let's talk about some of the combat, because it did take a while for me to get used to the actual combat, like parrying, evading, all of that. It is a little bit janky. It is a little bit sensitive because you could hit parry and it won't parry, or you could hit evade and it won't evade, or you feel like you're hitting the takedown button and it's not going to take them down. There's the finisher moves, which sometimes do not work. That is a legitimate complaint I have. It does take a little bit of getting used to. I don't know if I like necessarily the button scheme or the button layout that they have to use, because for some reason I kept it, especially in combat. It took me about half the game to get used to the combat system, or at least the hand-to-hand combat system and the cover system. In cover, you're like, it's not like the previous Bond games where you're up against the wall and you just stay against the wall. Like, you are behind cover, but you're not like attached to the wall or anything. So I can't, like, I kept hitting circle to or square to reload when it's actually circle. I kept hitting, I think it was like L1 to crouch when it's not crouch. It's press in on the right stick. So it did take a little bit of getting used to the button schemes and the inputs there until about halfway. Now, when you get to the tactical simulation mode, which opens up at a certain point in the game, and I wish I had done this earlier in the game because I spent about 30 to 40 minutes playing tactical simulations after I had beaten the main campaign, and I did a lot better in the combat. And it is just one of those things. I think story-wise in the campaign, they throw so much at you all at once, everything in their mother during the campaign, where the prompts that tell you like how to do things go away really quickly. Whereas in TaxSim, they stay up in the upper left corner, so you know which buttons to press, and you're not on a timer, so you can kind of take your time with it to get used to the flow of combat. And I wish that I had done that after I had unlocked some TaxSim stuff before I progressed in the story so I could get used to the combat a little bit more. Yeah, they throw a lot at you all at once. It did have a great combat montage though. One of my other complaints with this is some of the writing. I like the villain. I don't necessarily know if I like their motivation. The actual plot of the game, predictable, but I just don't think it was bombastic enough or over the top enough to be a Bond plot. It did feel like it entered generic spy thriller territory in terms of the plot and what the actual villainous scheme was. I'll talk more about it in the spoiler review, but I probably missed a couple things here and there. But honestly, this is, despite those minor gripes with some of the writing and the combat system, 007 First Light is above and beyond what I was expecting. I was expecting a good game. I got a really great game. I kind of held my expectations in check, especially after 007 Legends 14 years ago disappointed us. This is a match made in heaven. I hope IO Interactive gets to make another James Bond game because this was so much fun, addicting, so many different ways, so many different avenues to go about completing your objectives. Visually stunning, could do things you don't really get to do in a Bond game, like walk around MI6, QLab. The driving sequences are great. Bond himself and his supporting cast, awesome. Could not ask a better Bond game. Oh, and this isn't just a shoot 'em up game. You are doing actual spy work in this game. Yes, some of the missions are going to be paced very slow. That is intentional. The big actiony Bond, big blockbuster set pieces come towards the end of the game, but they are able to mix those with the stealth or the spy intelligence work. A lot of this game is gathering intelligence, being a spy. What is espionage all about? They mixed it so well, which is why they were so perfect to develop a Bond game because they had already done a lot of that with Hitman, where you kind of have to get in, get out without being seen. You do that a lot with Bond. They relies a lot more on gadgets, surveillance, intelligence, paying attention to certain dialogue options because you have multiple dialogue options as well. Despite my qualms, a well-rounded Bond experience. 007 First Light gets a 9 out of 10 from me. I cannot wait to see what else they have cooked up their sleeves in terms of Bond. It's a great time to be alive. A new, shiny Bond thing. I can't believe it. I have been waiting for this day for so long. And I was so disappointed when this game got pushed back from March to this month.
It's been a long time. And finally, here we are.
And I've completed it. I cannot wait to talk spoilers with you guys. So, as I said, there's going to be a lot of 007 First Light content coming on this channel. This is going to get me back into the game, I hope. It definitely got Bond back into the game. So, have you played 007 First Light? Let me know what you think of it in the comments below. I'll leave my links to my website in the description below as well. I don't think I left anything out in terms of gameplay. If I have, comment that down below too. You guys are the best. Thank you for watching. My name is Alex Madden, and I will see you at the movies somewhere.